December 2023. Venezuela and its neighbor Guyana are embroiled in a diplomatic crisis revolving around the resource-rich region of Essequibo in Guyana. The territory has been disputed between the two nations for well over a century, with Venezuela now renewing their claim to the region due to the recent discovery of oil. The crisis has been escalating, with the armies of both sides mobilizing and threatening all-out war. The conflict would likely see more than just Guyana and Venezuela involved, but also Brazil and potentially other South and Central American nations, and potentially even the United States. In this video, I'll be discussing the history of the dispute over Essequibo, the timeline of events in 2023, and what a potential conflict over the region could look like. The dispute over the region known as Essequibo predates both Venezuela and Guyana, going all the way back to the early 1800s when Spain ruled over what is now Venezuela and Britain ruled over what is now Guyana. At the time, Essequibo was a part of British Guyana, and Spain maintained a claim over the region. The dispute was never resolved. After gaining independence, Venezuela also maintained the old Spanish claim to Essequibo. This escalated in 1895 when Venezuela pressed their claim on the region. In 1899, after years of dispute and foreign arbitration, the border was firmly established where it is today. The conflict was not over here, though. In 1966, Guyana was seeking to become independent, and Venezuela wished to revisit the territorial dispute. This led to the 1966 Geneva Agreement signed between Britain, Venezuela, and the newly independent Guyana to hold talks to come to a more satisfactory agreement over Essequibo. Essentially, it was an agreement to come to an agreement, though little had been acted on in the years since. So what has been the cause of this renewed conflict over the region? Well, Guyana Essequibo is home to 128,000 people. Despite making up 2/3 of Guyana's territory, it only represents 16% of Guyana's total population of 795,000. In 2015, Exxon found oil reserves off the coast of Essequibo. In the years since, a total of 46 gas fields have been discovered that are estimated to contain over 4 billion barrels of oil. This has led to a huge influx of revenue for Guyana, which they have been reinvesting into their historically impoverished nation. This has included building new schools, hospitals, and highways. These vast reserves have caught the eye of Venezuela. Venezuela spent the next few years harassing Guyana over the region. Its navy had detained oil survey vessels and fishing boats, and its air force had violated Guyana's airspace. In 2018, Guyana filed an application with the International Court of Justice to hold and oversee proceedings between Guyana and Venezuela regarding Essequibo. Venezuela refused to participate or recognize the ICJ. Meanwhile, Venezuela is facing its own internal struggles. Venezuela has access to the world's largest amount of proven oil reserves. The nation has exploited these natural resources for years, but mismanagement of nationalized companies and international sanctions has led to an economic crisis in Venezuela. This has caused the government of Venezuela, under President Nicolas Maduro, to become extremely unpopular, with elections coming in 2024. Though these aren't likely to be free and fair, as many opposition leaders have been disqualified from running. This internal strife has led Venezuela and Maduro to create the current crisis, which began in late October when President Maduro announced a referendum asking 5 yes or no questions related to Essequibo that would be held in December. These questions were: do you agree to reject by all means in accordance with the law the line fraudulently interposed by the 1899 Paris Arbitration Award, which seeks to deprive us of our Guyana Essequibo? Do you support the 1966 Geneva Agreement as the only valid legal instrument to reach a practical and satisfactory solution for Venezuela and Guyana regarding the controversy over the territory of Guyana Essequibo? Do you agree with Venezuela's historical position of not recognizing the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice to resolve the territorial controversy over Guyana Essequibo? Do you agree to oppose by all legal means Guyana's claim to unilaterally dispose of a sea pending delimitation illegally and in violation of international law. Do you agree with the creation of the Guyana Essequibo state and the development of an accelerated plan for comprehensive care for the current and future population of that territory, which includes, among others, the granting of citizenship and identity card? Venezuela, in accordance with the Geneva Agreement and international law, consequently incorporating said state on the map of Venezuelan territory. This referendum sparked fears that Venezuela would attempt to annex Essequibo. This was followed by reports of Venezuelan troops arriving on the border of Guyana and an airstrip being built near the border as well. Guyana's president, Irfan Ali, pledged to defend Guyana's sovereignty while also appealing to the UN and other nations for assistance. In late November, military leaders from both Brazil and Guyana met to discuss strategy. This was followed by Brazil mobilizing some of its troops to go to the Venezuelan border to act as a deterrent to any aggression against Guyana. The International Court of Justice also ordered Venezuela to not take any action against Guyana. On December 3rd, Venezuela held the referendum. Every question asked was answered with a yes, though many international observers believed the results were likely falsified by Venezuela. Brazil responded to this by sending hundreds of additional troops to the border with Venezuela, while also raising concerns of an imminent invasion of Guyana. Venezuela also announced they would be authorizing their state-owned oil companies to begin drilling for oil in the disputed waters off Guyana. The United States also began its own direct involvement in the crisis by announcing military exercises with Guyana that were held on December 7th. So where are we as of the making of this video? Well, on December 9th, it was announced that the nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines would host negotiations over the region. President Ali of Guyana and President Maduro of Venezuela both agreed to the meeting. President Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil and the General Secretary of the UN agreed to attend as well to help mediate the talks. Guyana maintains that they will not give up Essequibo. I now want to look at what a conflict in the region would look like. First, let's examine the region of Essequibo. It's largely covered in jungle with very little modern infrastructure. It's crossed by several large rivers that run throughout the region. While there are numerous towns and villages in the region, few are connected via road, and what roads are present are largely unpaved. The entire area is extremely hard to traverse, especially for vehicles. We also need to look at the opposing forces involved, starting with the Guyana Defense Force. The force has 4,600 active personnel and 3,000 reservists. It is largely a light infantry-based force. They have no tanks, and they only have 6 Brazilian-made EE-9 Cascavel armored fighting vehicles as far as heavy equipment goes. They have no heavy artillery, and they only have 6 Soviet-made 130mm field guns and approximately 48 mortars in their inventory. As for small arms, the Defense Force is armed with an array of foreign-made weapons, from Soviet SKS rifles, AKMs, and RPGs, to Chinese-made Type 56 rifles, to American-made M16s, and an assortment of Belgian and British rifles and machine guns. The force is faced with having a lack of uniformity in its soldiers and needing a wide range of ammunition types. Their navy is practically non-existent, consisting of only 5 old patrol boats purchased from the US and UK, and their air force is also practically non-existent. It consists of 6 civilian planes converted for military use and only 4 utility helicopters, although one of these crashed on December 6th with the loss of 5 members of the Defense Force. Meanwhile, Venezuela has a far larger and better equipped military. They have approximately 150,000 active personnel across all their branches. The Venezuelan army is also well equipped, containing over 170 main battle tanks, primarily old Soviet T-72s and French AMX-30s. They also have over 100 light tanks, primarily British Scorpion 90s, and around a dozen and a half AMX-13s. They also have hundreds of light recon vehicles, as well as over 100 Russian-built BMP-3s and over 100 Russian-built BTR-80s. The Venezuelan army also has a wide range of artillery, from American howitzers to Russian rocket artillery to mortars from various countries of origin. For small arms, the AK-103 is the standard issue rifle for the Venezuelan army. The army also operates several high-end attack helicopters, as well as operating an assortment of utility helicopters. The Venezuelan Air Force is small, but boasts around 24 Russian Su-30s and around 24 U.S. F-16s. It is important to note that the condition of the F-16s is unknown since U.S. sanctions barred the sale of any spare parts for the aircraft. They also operate a wide range of utility and transport aircraft. Finally is Venezuela's Navy. They have 2 German-built submarines, 4 large patrol vessels, 6 gunboats, and 19 patrol boats of various types. In the event of a war between Venezuela and Guyana, there is the distinct possibility of Brazilian involvement, so let's cover their armed forces as well. Brazil has over 360,000 active personnel across their branches, with another 340,000 in reserve. Brazil has over 460 main battle tanks of various types, such as American M60s and German Leopard 1s. They have nearly 2,000 armored vehicles of nearly a dozen different types, over 1,000 artillery pieces, many of which are American-made, and also have around 200 self-propelled artillery pieces, including American-made M109s. Their soldiers are equipped with the domestically designed and produced Imbel IA-2 rifle. Their Air Force has over 40 American F-5s and over 40 AMX International ground attack aircraft, as well as various utility and transport aircraft. The Navy has 3 submarines, 6 frigates, 2 corvettes, and 23 patrol boats. Overall, the Brazilian armed forces are well equipped and modern compared to their Venezuelan counterparts. Now, what would the fighting look like in Essequibo? Due to the dense jungle and poor infrastructure in the region, this would likely negate Venezuela's advantages in armored vehicles and air power. Guyana would gain the advantage as a defender by using this terrain as a force multiplier. They'd likely use unconventional tactics against Venezuela, utilizing hit and runs, ambushes, etc. to wear down Venezuelan troops and to leverage their relatively small and under-equipped force. The jungle would provide cover from air attack and make it nearly impossible for armored vehicles to be used effectively, if at all. Guyana's troops will be able to melt away into the jungles and move to friendly villages to resupply or live off the land. Guyana's goal would be to make an invasion as costly and impractical as possible for Venezuela, either to convince Venezuela to call off the invasion on their own or buy time for foreign intervention by Brazil or potentially the United States. The difficult terrain of Essequibo, combined with the risk of foreign intervention, is why I believe a war between Guyana and Venezuela is highly unlikely. The current crisis is being instigated by Venezuela for a few reasons, in my opinion. For one, Maduro seems to be trying to drum up nationalistic fervor to distract from the economic crisis at home. He's also trying to boost his sagging popularity by engaging on a historic dispute with an election coming in 2024, even if that election is far from free and fair. I also believe that a secondary goal is that maybe Venezuela gains some type of concession from Guyana that allows Venezuela to drill some of the vast reserves in order to keep the peace. Regardless of the motivation, this crisis is ongoing. With important meetings upcoming, this crisis will reach an important milestone on December 14th when Maduro and Ali meet in person. I'll be sure to keep my eye on any developments and provide any updates as they come. For now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.